Welcome everyone to this new session of mobile communication and computing. In the last session, we got introduced to spread spectrum. What is the general idea behind spread spectrum? Now, in this session, we will see different techniques to spread the spectrum into a larger bandwidth. So, first of all, let's recall what are the advantages of spreading the signal into a larger bandwidth. Here, we are shown two diagrams. The first diagram is of signal transmission without spreading the signal, and second after using the spread spectrum technique. Now as you can see here, our user bandwidth is divided into smaller channels. These are called as narrowband channels. Narrowband means each channel will have small set of frequencies associated with it. Let's say each channel has 5 frequencies. So there are total 6 channels shown over here. Each contains 5 frequencies. Now when they are transmitted by the transmitting station, it suffers different levels of degradation within the wireless media. This variation in degradation or variation in the attenuation of individual channel is known as fading. As we know, fading is nothing but variation in the attenuation levels of different frequencies. Okay, so as you can see, channel number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, each channel suffers different level of attenuation. Now, as you can see, channel number 4 suffers the most attenuation during the free space. Now, because of this, it is in danger of completely getting wiped out. Getting wiped out means it will get completely suppressed in the free space. So, receiver will not be able to detect it, and obviously it will affect our communication. So whatever data which is sent on this channel number 4 will not be received by the receiver. Right now it is having certain power levels, but if fading continues, then it may suffer complete attenuation. Now this is called as frequency selective fading. It is called as frequency selective because only channel number 4 and its associated frequencies will get attenuated. That's why frequency selective. Okay, now instead of transmitting these channels as it is, if we spread the spectrum, then what will happen? Now instead of dividing the entire spectrum or channel into small narrowband channels, if we spread the user bandwidth or user signal into a spread spectrum signal or larger bandwidth signal, then entire bandwidth will be available for user transmission as shown in this second diagram. So entire user data is spread over the entire bandwidth, and such user data is transmitted at the same time. So even if there is a variation in attenuation like this, only certain frequencies are getting affected. So entire user data will not get affected because of losses in the wireless media. So if these parts are affected, they can be shifted to some other frequency which do not suffer same levels of attenuation. Then we can avoid frequency selective fading, and that is the primary advantage of using spread spectrum technique. So in short, spread spectrum technique is primarily used for avoiding frequency selective fading. So let's begin with the two techniques that we have discussed or stated previously. The first technique is direct sequence spread spectrum. It is most simplest form of spread spectrum technique. In this, a user data is simply XORed with a pseudo-random number, or it is also called a chipping sequence. So consider this diagram. Here you can see a user bit data. For example, 2 bits are taken, 0 and 1, is simply XORed with a pseudo-random number or chipping sequence. Now what will happen? As we know, XOR operation, let's say 0 is XORed with first number, that is 0 of a chipping sequence. 0 XOR with 0 results into 0. Then 0 XOR with 1 results into 1, and so on. So single data bit of 0 is converted into 7 data bits in the resulting signal. So your user data bandwidth is spreaded into a larger bandwidth. One data or 1 bit per data is 1 bit per data is converted into 7 bits per data. So that is nothing but spreading of the signal. We can use as many number of smaller bits in a chipping sequence as we want. For example, 128 chips per bit will result into a higher bandwidth of a signal. If you want much larger bandwidth, you can use much larger chipping sequence. So the resulting spread spectrum signal will have a bandwidth which is dependent on size of a chipping sequence. So this is very simple operation which is performed at the transmitter end. Now advantages of this particular technique is that obviously it reduces the frequency selective fading. We are not saying it completely removes the frequency selective fading, but it reduces. So if particular frequency channel suffers the frequency selective fading, that data can be transferred to some another channel. So that's why we are saying it is reducing the frequency selective fading. Then in cellular network, base stations can use the same frequency range. So that is very useful because frequency resources are scarce in availability. So we can use the same frequency for multiple users as we are going to spread the signal into a larger bandwidth before transmission. Also, several base stations can detect and recover the signal. So since the chipping sequence is well known before transmission, several base stations can use that chipping sequence for detecting and recovering the signal. Also, soft handover is possible because of this technique. Now, soft handover means whenever a particular channel in the previous diagram, let's say particularly channel number 4, if it is in danger of getting wiped out, before it gets wiped out, the contents of that channel can be transferred to the another frequency. Okay, that is called as soft handover. Before completely getting wiped off, transfer to the new channel or new frequency, that is soft. If we are transferring the contents after getting wiped out, it will be called as hard handover. Details regarding handover we will discuss in module number 2. Okay, then there are certain disadvantages also or limitations also. One limitation primary being, as you can see, all the bits are carrying the same amplitude levels. So you need a precise power control to make this effective. If one of the bit reduces its power level, then there will be a problem in receiving the user data or resulting signal, because to distinguish between zeros and ones, you need a certain amplitude level representing 0 and certain amplitude level representing 1. So precise power control is necessary for DSSS to be effective. Now, if the chipping sequence is generated properly, it appears as random noise, and that's why it is called as pseudo noise sequence. Pseudo means it appears as noise, but it is not actually a noise. So it kind of provides the security as well during the free space or wireless media, that although it appears as noise, its sequence is already known to receiver, so receiver will be able to understand it, but the intruder won't be able to understand. That's why DSSS is primarily preferred in CDMA technology. Okay, then spreading factor, that is S, is defined to be TB upon TC. It determines the bandwidth of this resulting signal. What is TB and TC? As you can see in this diagram, TB is a bit period, here it is shown, which is much larger. Larger bit period means smaller frequency, and TC is a width of single pulse or period of a single chipping bit. Period of a single chipping bit, as here it is shown, TC. Okay, so TB upon TC. TC is much smaller, that means it is having a larger frequency because chipping period is small, so frequency will be large. So TB upon TC will decide the frequency of resulting signal or bandwidth of resulting signal. If the original signal needs bandwidth of W, that is if it has a TB equal to W, resulting signal will need bandwidth of S into W after spreading. So larger the S, better the spreading of the signal. Now different applications use different spreading factors. Like civil applications use a spreading factor between 10 and 100, whereas military applications prefer much higher spreading factors, that is up to 10,000, whereas wireless LANs or Wi-Fi's as compared with the IEEE standard uses a special code called as Barker code, which is of minimum of 11 bit, as the sequence of those 11 bits are shown to you. So different applications prefer different spreading sequence so that no two applications will receive each other's signals and they can avoid the interference. So depending on application, spreading factor may vary. Now let's see the DSSS transmission, how it is done, and DSSS reception. Now let's take an example of user data of having a bandwidth of 1 megahertz. Let's say we are having user data with bandwidth of 1 megahertz here. Now to spread it to a larger bandwidth, we are using 11-bit Barker code here as a chipping sequence. So 11-bit Barker code is used as chipping sequence, 1 mega, 11-bit. So 1 into 11, that will result into spread spectrum signal of 11 megahertz. Now this 11 megahertz signal is a spread spectrum signal, but still it is not ready for transmission because 11 megahertz, although higher than 1 megahertz, it is not high enough to get transmitted over a longer distance. So to take it to the much higher frequency level, like commercial frequency bands of 2.4 gigahertz in the ISM level, we have to modulate this signal with a radio carrier or such high frequency to generate a larger frequency signal. So this 11 megahertz signal is applied to a modulator which accepts another input as a radio carrier, let's say frequency FC, which will be much larger than 11 megahertz, but still it will be in the megahertz region. Then after modulation, it will generate our desired signal of frequency 2.4 gigahertz. Okay, so one question that would arise, why we are not using 2.4 gigahertz frequency at chipping level? First thing, to generate 2.4 gigahertz frequency from a hardware is very difficult task. Crystal oscillators or other oscillators which are capable of generating high frequency, they will not be stable at such high frequencies. So we avoid using this particular frequency in the first stage. So we are taking it step by step. That is the reason we are using two steps for DSSS. First step is spreading the signal and second step is modulation, which will give us desired results of 2.4 gigahertz frequency, and that would be transmitted. So transmitter is a simple one. Now let's go to the reception. Reception is slightly complex compared to the transmission. Now one key part here, the chipping sequence used at the transmitter level must be known to the receiver also. If receiver does not know the chipping sequence used by the transmitter, then receiver will not be able to receive or detect the transmitted signal. Now let's see the receiver. Receiving is a exactly inverse procedure of the transmission. The blocks involved in this is also in the reverse order. That means, let's say we have received this 2.4 gigahertz signal which was transmitted. So 2.4 gigahertz is received by the receiver. Now we have to take down this 2.4 gigahertz to 11 megahertz. So for achieving that, we are using a demodulator which is having another input as a radio carrier, same carrier that was used at the transmitter level, having a frequency same, that is of Fc. So 2.4 gigahertz is demodulated with Fc to generate 11 megahertz signal. Now demodulator usually generates multiple products. To select our desired 11 megahertz signal, we are using low pass filter, so that only 11 megahertz signal will be available at the output and other products of the demodulator will be ignored by the system or receiver. So this 11 megahertz signal obtained at the output of a demodulator is then given to a block called as correlator. Now correlator is a term that you will see also in the DSIP. Correlator means it will simply compare the demodulated signal with either 0 or 1. 0 will be represented by certain amplitude level and 1 will be represented by certain amplitude level. So relation between received signal or received bits with 0 and 1 will be compared and decision will be made. So inside the correlator we have two blocks. One is a simple XOR operation, which is also used at the transmitter, and then integrator. So let's see first XOR. So 11 megahertz signal is XORed with the same chipping sequence which was used at the transmitter end. Now if you recall the original example, let's see this one. Now at the receiver, this is our received signal and this is the chipping sequence that we have used. If we perform XOR operation of these two here, then what we will get? First bit is 0, 0, 0 XOR with 0, it comes as a 0. Then second bit is 1, 1, 1 XOR with 1, again 0, 1 XOR with 1, again 0. So if you XOR all these bits, you will get 7 zeros. Usually in practical cases, the received signal is not of same shape as the transmitted signal, because during the medium it will suffer attenuation and its power levels will be smaller than the transmitted signal. So sometimes you may also get errors in the received signal. So to avoid those errors, what we are going to do? We are going to integrate all these 7 bits which are generated after XOR operation. Now rather than summing them, summing will increase the power levels. We are going to integrate them. Integrate will perform manual or analog summation of the received bits. So in the integrator, all those 7 bits are integrated or combined together, and whatever power level comes, that is compared with our 0 or 1. Depending on the relation between integrator output and the predefined levels of 0 and 1, a decision will be taken at the decision block and it will be decided whether received data bit was 0 or 1. Okay, so decision block will be responsible for deciding whether received data bit is 0 or 1. So this is how this DSSS receiver works. So we have seen what is DSSS transmitter and what is DSSS receiver. Now this is all about DSSS. Now let's go to the second technique, that is FHSS. DSSS is primarily used for digital signals. That's why it is preferred in CDMA technology. Now let's see FHSS, how it is used and where it is used. Now FHSS stands for frequency hopping spread spectrum. Now in this particular technique, the entire available bandwidth is split into many channels of smaller bandwidth, plus guard spaces between them to avoid adjacent channel interference. Interference between two consecutive channels is called as adjacent channel interference, ACI. Now transmitter and receiver stay on one of these smaller channels for a certain period of time and then hop or jump to another channel. Remember, we have divided entire bandwidth into small channels. Okay, so when we are going to transmit the user data, user bit will be remaining on one of these small channels for certain period of time, then it will be jumping to another small channel for another period of time, and so on. So In short, this system is implementing a combination of both FDM and TDM, that is frequency division multiplexing and time division multiplexing. Because splitting the large bandwidth into smaller channels is nothing but our FDM, whereas transmitting user data for a small amount of time for a particular channel is nothing but TDM. Okay, at different times we are using different channels, so that is TDM. So the pattern of channel usage is called as hopping sequence. So what is pattern of channel usage? Let's say I have divided a bandwidth into 4 channels, F1, F2, F3, F4. So there are 4 smaller channels available for user data transmission. Now my data will be transmitted not in the same sequence F1, F2, F3, F4. It may stay on F4 initially, later on it will jump on F2, then it may jump on F1 again, and then it may jump on F3 again. So the sequence 4, 2, 1, 3 is different than the original sequence. This sequence or pattern of channel usage is called as hopping sequence. Sometimes we use the same channel again, like F4, F2, F1, then again I might use F4 again. So this may also happen, so that frequency selective fading can be avoided. Okay. So the time spent on a particular smaller channel with certain frequency is called as a dwell time. So amount of time spent on a particular channel by a user bit is called as a dwell time. So the sequence of frequency is determined by again the same chipping sequence or pseudo noise sequence. So this combination that we have seen 4, 2, 1, 3, it is not random, it is predefined by this pseudo random number sequence or pseudo noise sequence. There are two types of this FHSS, fast hopping and slow hopping. In fast hopping, a single user bit stays on number of frequency channels, that is several frequencies per user bit. 0 may stay on 3 frequencies. In slow hopping, exactly reverse. 3 bits might stay on single frequency. How this is deployed or how it is implemented, that we will see. So consider this diagram. This is our user data. This is our user data. Now consider this 0, 1, 0. Consider the example of slow hopping. Now in slow hopping, several bits on a single channel. So let's say 3 bits are using the same frequency channel. So 0, 1, 0, that is the first set of user data bits, are initially staying on channel number 2, that is F2. So you can see 0 is staying on F2, 1 is also staying on F2, and 0 is also staying on F2. After that, they will move to the next channel, or they will hop to the next channel, that is F3. Now if you see carefully, to distinguish between 0 and 1, user data bit 0 stays on a frequency slightly lower than F2, whereas user data bit 1 stays on a frequency slightly higher than F2. So that will distinguish us between 0 and 1. If frequency is slightly lower than F2, it will be 0. If frequency is slightly higher than F2, it will be 1. So 3 data bits per single frequency channel, F2 then F3. Sequence followed is F2 and F3. Then in the fast hopping, one user data bit stays on several channels. Let's say 0. Initially it stays on F1. Since it is a 0, a frequency slightly lower than F1 is used. Then it jumps or hops to F3, frequency slightly lower than F3, and then it jumps to F2, frequency slightly lower than F2. So the pattern followed is F1, 3, 2. Now these patterns are generated by pseudo noise sequence. So this is fast hopping. One user data bit staying on multiple channels. One user data bit staying on multiple channels. So this is regarding slow hopping and fast hopping. Now let's see what are the transmitters and receivers look like. So before seeing them, let's see the advantages. The advantages of FHSS, obviously, the entire spread spectrum technology is having advantage of reducing the frequency selective fading. Then if you see, the implementation of this is much simpler in terms of transmitter and receiver. Implementation is simpler, we will see that now. And third advantage is it uses only small portion of spectrum at given moment of time. So other remaining spectrum remains available for other applications as well. The disadvantage is it is not as robust as DSSS. Since we are dividing the bandwidth into smaller channels, still we will encounter the frequency selective fading. Although it is reduced to a certain level, it will still be higher than that of DSSS. Another disadvantage is it is simpler to detect. Now, why this is a disadvantage? This is a disadvantage in terms of attacks. If it is simpler to detect, any intruder can simply detect the transmission, and higher security needs to be provided. So the real life example of FHSS is Bluetooth. Now as you can see, Bluetooth is using 1600 hops per second and using 79 different channels for performing these 1600 hops. So there are channels F1 to F79. The sequence followed for utilizing these 79 frequencies is within 1 second 1600 jumps are made from F1 to F79 to F73 or any other pattern. So Bluetooth is using FHSS. Now let's see the transmitter and receiver of the FHSS. It is much simpler compared to the DSSS. You can see a user data which is having certain frequency is applied to a modulator. This is done for taking it to the higher frequency range. Here it will be a carrier FC. Now our user data, let's say 1 megahertz. Carrier will be of much larger frequency. So this FC will divide the entire bandwidth into smaller narrowband signals, and then frequency synthesizer, which is used for generating frequencies, will provide another input to the second modulator, which will spread this narrowband signal into spread spectrum signal. Okay, so that means again two-level transmission scheme. Initially user data converted into a higher frequency of a narrowband signal, then using the frequency synthesizer, smaller channels are generated which are used for hopping by a narrowband signal. This narrowband signal hops to one of the frequency generated by frequency synthesizer. Synthesizer means it will generate different frequency levels or signals with different frequency levels. Now input to this frequency synthesizer is hopping sequence, which will decide pattern in which or sequence in which these frequencies are generated, like F2, F4, F1. Such sequence will be decided by hopping sequence. Then such spreaded signal will be transmitted. Okay, so that is transmitter. Receiver again is exactly reverse procedure of that transmission, where received signal, which is spreaded one, is demodulated using same hopping sequence and same frequency synthesizer. The pattern followed here, if it was 4, 2, 1, same pattern is used here, that is 4, 2 and 1. Hopping sequence will remain same. So despreading will happen here. This is a despreading. So it will generate a narrowband signal which is of higher frequency compared to the original user data. From that narrowband signal, again we will use carrier to generate a frequency or signal of a original user data signal. So the second demodulator is responsible for downgrading the higher frequency signal to the original frequency of the user data. Here there is no need to use a correlator because the signal which is generally involved is hopping to different frequencies rather than having a particular time slot to it. So no correlation is required. So this is FHSS, which is much simpler for generation and detection compared to DSS. That's all for today. In the next lecture or in the next series or in the next session, we will see about the last point, that is cellular systems used in the mobile communication. Thank you.